The autumnal chill had settled like a prudish aunt over the village of Bramley Cross, where the leaves performed their annual surrender in hues of ochre and decay. Bellringer Cottage, a modest if not particularly distinguished residence on the village's fringes, was an unlikely theatre for the macabre. Yet it was precisely there, in that tame tableau of creeping ivy and neatly trimmed hedges, that Lord Peter Wimsey found himself uncharacteristically drawn one fog-drenched evening. Summons had come by the hand of the vicar, an anxious gentleman whose habitual pallor was now almost luminescent. "Lord Peter," he had written with a desperation unbefitting his usual clerical composure, "you must assist. There is a most singular silence at Bellringer Cottage. Mr. Ernest Cotterell has vanished. No notes, no farewells, simply no sound." Wimsey, leaning back in the rickety village coach that rattled down the lane, allowed himself a mild smirk. "A silence, you say? The absence of noise? How delightfully metaphysical." He turned to his companion, the steadfast Bunter, who had at once taken to calling the affair the quietest murder in England. Arriving at Bellringer, Wimsey's sharp eye noted the peculiarity of the scene. The front door was ajar, a mere sliver as if inviting a whisper of disturbance. He stepped inside, his polished boots unsettling the fragile hush. The cottage interior was charmingly old-fashioned, with faded wallpaper and the faint aroma of lavender, yet an undertone of neglect hinted at secrets dusted beneath the surface. On the mantelpiece rested a curious object, a clock, hands frozen at precisely 2:17. Wimsey's eyebrow arched. "How quaint," he murmured. "A clock that stopped the moment misfortune struck, or merely a neglectful keeper of time. One might speculate on the symbolism, but I prefer facts over sentiment." He gave the clock a gentle prod. "Though if I were to quote Horace, I'd insist on accuracy rather than the popular carpe diem. Carpe noctem in this case, perhaps." In the corner, a portrait of Mr. Cotterell hung askew, his expression stern but not unkind, rather the face of a man who had little patience for disorder. Wimsey's gaze lingered. "Our silent friend does not seem one to abandon a mess without a reason. This will not be a simple disappearance." From the shadows of the parlour, the housekeeper, a woman of stout build and nervy hands, emerged. "We heard nothing, Lord Peter, not a sound to warn us." Her voice trembled slightly. "One moment he was here, the next gone." Wimsey inclined his head with a faint smile, more courteous than comforting. "Silences, madam, are often the loudest things in a house." And so, as the autumn night deepened, the puzzle at Bellringer Cottage began not with a bang, but a silence which, Wimsey suspected with mild amusement, would prove far from simple. Wimsey's eyes did not waver from the housekeeper's nervy hands as she spoke. There was a subtle tremor in them, a quiet agitation that did not quite match the composed tone of her voice. It was, Wimsey thought with a faint flicker of interest, the sort of detail easily overlooked by a less discerning observer, or indeed by the official constabulary, who were already sighing with relief at the apparent simplicity of a disappearance rather than a murder. To the local police, a missing man was a vexation to be solved by rote. To Lord Peter, it was an invitation to think. He walked deeper into the cottage, the creaking floorboards sighing beneath his weight, revealing a household untouched by the frantic energy of a modern crime scene. Instead, it was a tableau of domestic stillness. A teacup, half full, perched precariously on the edge of the sideboard, an open book, face down on the worn armchair, and a single slipper, oddly placed near the threshold of the door, leading to the back garden. Each object seemed trivial, yet in the hands of a detective such as Wimsey, these trifles acquired a silent eloquence. "Madam," he said gently, Might I trouble you for the names of those in the household who were here yesterday? Anyone who might have seen Mr. Cotterell in his usual hours. She nodded briskly, pulling herself together as if summoned by the question. Yes, of course, Lord Peter. There is Mrs. Havisham, the cook, who left at 6. Young Timothy, the gardener's boy, who came by to deliver some tools around midday, and my nephew George, who stays in the nearby village but visited for dinner last night. Dinner, Whimsy repeated, tapping a finger thoughtfully on the mantelpiece. At Bellringer Cottage, no less. Was Mr. Cotterell in good health? Any recent quarrels or disagreements? The housekeeper hesitated, then said, Mr. Cotterell was somewhat preoccupied of late, yes. He had been receiving letters, strange ones, some marked urgent, though he never showed them to any of us. There was also talk of a visitor expected this week, but no one knew who. Letters marked urgent, a detail that raised Whimsy's interest considerably. Such missives often carried more weight than a dozen overheard arguments. And these letters, madam, were they delivered here or elsewhere? Here, at the cottage. But Mr. Cotterell was very private about them. I only saw glimpses when he thought no one was watching. Whimsy filed this away, a small but significant thread in the tapestry of mystery. The notion of a secret visitor dovetailed neatly with the housekeeper's earlier nervousness. Discretion in matters of private correspondence often masks more than mere shyness. He made his way towards the dining room, where the long table was still set for a meal, as if awaiting its occupant. The clock on the mantel there, too, had stopped. This, one at precisely 2:17, mirroring the one in the parlour. The coincidence was too glaring to be ignored, and Whimsy made a mental note to return to this oddity later. As he examined the place settings, his keen eyes caught sight of a faint smudge on one of the silver teaspoons, a mark that might have been caused by haste or distraction. "Has anyone else handled these utensils recently?" he inquired, glancing back towards the housekeeper. "Only myself and Mrs. Havisham," she replied, "but the cook finished her duties quite early, around 6 o'clock yesterday." "Ah, and what of Mr. Cotterell's habits? Was he an early riser or more prone to late nights?" "More the latter, I think," she said with a shiver. "Often in his study until well past midnight, poring over papers." That, Whimsy mused, aligned well with the idea of secret correspondence. A man who guards his letters is often a man who carries a burden. He decided to inspect the study next. The door gave a faint creak as he pushed it open, revealing a modest room lined with bookshelves cluttered with leather-bound volumes. A heavy oak desk stood by the window, strewn with scattered papers, blotting ink, and a pair of reading glasses left askew. Whimsy approached, his eyes scanning the documents. There was an air of disturbance here. Papers were not merely scattered, but shuffled hastily, as though someone had searched for something, or wished to make it appear so. His gaze fell on a letter partially concealed beneath the blotter. Carefully, he slid it out and read the embossed header. Clifton and Prendergast, Solicitors, London. The letter was dated only 3 days prior. Whimsy's eyes narrowed as he read the formal but urgent tone of the solicitor's note concerning a matter of inheritance and a certain condition precedent that required Mr. Cotterell's immediate attention. "Aha," Whimsy whispered. "The expected visitor may well be less a social call and more a harbinger of legal consequence." He tucked the letter carefully into his jacket pocket and turned towards the window. From here, the garden stretched out, bordered by thick hedges and mature oaks. The fog was creeping in low, muffling the outside world in a blanket of quiet. That moment a sharp rap at the front door startled the room. The housekeeper hurried away to answer, returning moments later with a man whose presence seemed to fill the small space, tall, dark-haired, and with the unmistakable air of a professional. "Inspector Gibbons," announced the housekeeper. "He's come from the Bramley Cross Police." Whimsy inclined his head politely. "Inspector, a pleasure, though I suspect you come not merely for the weather." Gibbons smiled thinly. "Lord Peter, we've heard the news. Missing persons, sadly, all too common these days. But Mr. Cotterell's disappearance has certain peculiarities. Some believe foul play, others a simple flight. We're inclined to the latter." Whimsy allowed himself a faint arch of the brow. "Flight is a convenient assumption for the police. It relieves the necessity for deeper thought." The inspector shrugged. "We must follow leads, not shadows." "Indeed," Whimsy agreed. "And yet shadows often cast the longest leads." He glanced around the room, noting the half-open door to the pantry, the uneven ticking of the clocks, the misplaced slipper by the entrance. "May I ask, Inspector, what inquiries have you made thus far?" Servants interviewed, neighbours questioned. No one saw or heard anything unusual, no signs of forced entry. And yet Mr. Cotterell is nowhere to be found. Whimsy nodded thoughtfully. "Sometimes the most telling evidence lies not in what is seen, but in what is unseen or unheard." The inspector's eyes twinkled with grudging respect. "I gather you have a theory." "Not yet, but the pieces are gathering," said Whimsy. "May I request access to the letters Mr. Cotterell received?" "They've been collected and are awaiting review at the station," said Gibbons. "You may accompany me." "Excellent," said Whimsy. "There is one more thing I should observe before we depart." He approached the mantelpiece and glanced again at the clock frozen at 2:17. "It seems our Mr. Cotterell's time ended at this precise moment. A synchrony of silence and stillness that, I suspect, is no mere coincidence." The inspector followed his gaze. "Perhaps a clue." "Or a deliberate misdirection," Whimsy murmured, already turning toward the door. "Come, Inspector. The game is afoot, and I do enjoy a puzzle that requires a certain delicate unravelling." Outside, the fog had thickened into an impenetrable veil, swallowing the cottage and the village beyond. As Whimsy stepped onto the gravel path, he felt, with a surge of that peculiar excitement reserved for the true seeker of truth, that Bellringer Cottage held more than the echo of silence. It harboured secrets, complex, interwoven, and waiting to be coaxed into the light. And somewhere within those shadows lay the answer. The journey to the Bramley Cross police station was marked by a quiet exchange of observations and muted glances. Inspector Gibbons drove with the stoic efficiency one might expect of a man who had seen his share of disappointment and petty crime, but whose patience for eccentric aristocrats with puzzling theories was admittedly thin. Whimsy, perched lightly on the edge of the front seat, regarded the passing countryside with a detachment that belied the keen attention he was paying to every detail. The cadence of the inspector's speech, the subtle creak of the car's suspension, even the angle of the sun slipping behind the trees. Upon arrival, Whimsy was led through the modest station to a small, cluttered office, where a plain oak table groaned beneath a stack of letters, all meticulously catalogued and sealed. The air smelled faintly of damp paper and ink, an atmosphere more conducive to dusty archives than modern sleuthing. Inspector Gibbons produced a key and unlocked a drawer, pulling out a thin bundle of correspondence addressed to Ernest Cotterell. "We've examined these briefly, Lord Peter. Most are routine, but a few are unusual enough to warrant attention." Whimsy settled in, fingers steepled, and began sifting through the letters with the slow deliberation of a man who savoured complexity. Most were perfunctory notes, bills, reminders, invitations, but interspersed were several that bore the solicitor's insignia, including the letter he had already seen in the study. One in particular caught his eye. It was written on creamy, thick paper, the handwriting sharp and elegant, yet with an edge of urgency. "Dearest Ernest," it began, "I write with grave concern that compels immediate action. The matter of your late E. Uncle's estate, as you are doubtless aware, is more fraught with complications than the brief correspondence has suggested. There are, regrettably, conditions that must be fulfilled before the inheritance may be settled, and any delay may jeopardize your claim entirely. I implore you to meet with me at Bellringer Cottage at the earliest possible moment. Yours sincerely, Clifton Prendergast. Wimsey's brow furrowed. A meeting expected here, in the very house from which our Mr. Cotterell has vanished. Curiously, the letter suggests the solicitor himself, Mr. Prendergast, was to visit. Has anyone seen him? Inspector Gibbons shook his head. No one. Reported any visitor matching that description. We've asked the neighbours. No one recalled a solicitor arriving. It is, as you say, a curious omission. Wimsey's mind turned over the possibilities. The letter's urgency, the solicitor's absence, the mysterious letters, each a piece of a puzzle demanding to be joined. Is there any record of correspondence from Mr. Cotterell to Mr. Prendergast? Replies or notes? The inspector tapped a nearby phone. Not that I am aware. We have only these letters sent to Mr. Cotterell. Wimsey nodded slowly. Very well. Let us consider the timeline once more. He drew a small notebook from his pocket and began sketching a rough outline. We know from the housekeeper that Mr. Cotterell received several letters in the days preceding his disappearance. He expected a visitor, presumably the solicitor, around this time. We also know that the clocks in the cottage stopped at precisely 2:17. The inspector raised an eyebrow. You believe that time to be significant? More than that, Wimsey replied. It marks an event, a moment of consequence. Gibbons frowned. But nothing was reported at that hour, no disturbances, no visitors. Precisely, Wimsey said, which suggests the event occurred indoors, within the confines of Bellringer Cottage, and under conditions that ensured silence. Soundproofing, the inspector guessed, or something equally deliberate. Now the housekeeper mentioned a slipper misplaced near the door. Did she say whether it belonged to Mr. Cotterell or someone else? Good question, said Gibbons, rising to make a call. One moment. He spoke briefly, then returned. The slipper was Mr. Cotterell's, apparently. A custom-fit, brown leather, well worn. A man does not, as a rule, leave a single slipper behind without cause, Wimsey mused. Unless it was dropped in haste, or perhaps left deliberately, as a sign. The inspector looked sceptical, but said nothing. Wimsey was accustomed to such reactions. He often found himself the only voice of patience in a chorus eager to leap to conclusions. Let us consider the other inhabitants. The gardeners. Boy Timothy arrived midday with tools. Any signs that he saw or heard anything? Gibbons consulted a notebook. Timothy said he left the tools in the shed and saw Mr. Cotterell in the garden, watering the roses around 1 o'clock. He noticed nothing unusual. Wimsey's eyes gleamed. The roses, you say? Is the garden well enclosed? Completely. High hedges and a locked gate. Then it is a confined area. No outsider could approach without detection. And the nephew, George? Wimsey asked. George Cotterell arrived for dinner around 7 last night, left shortly after 9. He claims to have spoken with his uncle, but noticed nothing amiss. Curious, said Wimsey. The missing man was last seen by a family member whose testimony offers no hint of irregularity. He leaned back and let a faint smile curl his lips. It would seem everyone knows nothing at all, precisely the kind of knowledge that conceals everything. Gibbons chuckled despite himself. A phrase I have come to associate with your investigations, Lord Peter. Wimsey regarded him with a twinkle in his eye. Now, Inspector, there is one more matter of detail that intrigues me. The clocks. Both stopped at 2:17. Do you have any explanation for their sudden cessation? No, and no mechanical fault was noted during initial inspection. Were the clocks wound by the same person? Do they run on the same mechanism? Separate, but both are old-fashioned spring-wound. Then to stop simultaneously, or at least both at the same time, is either a remarkable coincidence or a calculated act. Whimsy's gaze shifted to the window, where the creeping fog seemed to seep into the very edges of thought. "Tell me, Inspector, has anyone inspected the doors and windows for signs of entry or exit?" Every lock and latch was intact. No sign of forced entry or tampering. "Ah," Whimsy murmured. "And yet our missing gentleman has vanished, without a trace." A silence fell between them, thick with unspoken theories. Then Whimsy rose, the wheels of his mind turning with the inexorable logic of a finely tuned machine. "Let us return to Bellringer Cottage. There is one place I neglected to examine. The back garden and the shed where the gardener's boy left his tools." The inspector agreed, and soon they were retracing their steps beneath the lowering sky, the mist curling like smoke around their boots. The garden was still and precise, each rosebush pruned to perfection, each path edged with gravel. That seemed freshly raked. Whimsy knelt by the shed door, brushing aside fallen leaves. "Locked. Yes. Timothy has the key. May I?" The boy, who had joined them unbidden, produced the key with a nervous smile. Whimsy's fingers worked the lock deftly, and the door creaked open to reveal the cluttered interior. Garden, tools, a wheelbarrow, pots of earth, and a curious item lying atop a pile of rakes. A leather-bound journal. Whimsy picked it up, flipping through the pages filled with neat handwriting and botanical notes. But tucked between the entries was something else, a scrap of paper, folded with care. He unfolded it and read a brief note. "Meet me where the roses bleed. Midnight. Come alone." He handed the note to Gibbons, whose expression darkened. "Where?" "The roses bleed. A poetic phrase for a place in the garden, perhaps?" "Indeed," Whimsy said, pocketing the journal, "and a meeting scheduled for midnight." Yet no one came, or at least no one stayed to witness the event. The inspector rubbed his chin thoughtfully. A rendezvous that ended in disappearance. Or worse, Whimsy whispered, as the evening air thickened and the distant church bell tolled. The puzzle was far from solved. The silence at Bellringer Cottage was no mere quietude. It was the hush before revelation. As twilight deepened into dusk, Lord Peter Whimsy and Inspector Gibbons made their way back into the house, the chill creeping into their bones as the fading light waned behind the hedgerows. The note, so cryptic yet pregnant with significance, had shifted the investigation onto a sharper edge. The phrase, "where the roses bleed," lingered with an almost poetic insistence, hinting at a meeting place that might hold the key to unraveling the mystery. Whimsy, his gaze momentarily drifting to the neat rows of roses visible through the window, mused aloud. "Roses bleed, Inspector. An allusion to a thorn or perhaps the colour of the blooms themselves. Have the roses any peculiar features or recent damage?" Gibbons considered this. "I have no reports, but I can ask the gardener." "Excellent," Whimsy replied. "Small details, Inspector, are often the first thread of the unravelled skein." The housekeeper greeted them with visible relief upon their return, though the tightness around her eyes had not lessened. She had been sent to summon Timothy and George, who had lingered nearby, restless with worry or perhaps curiosity. Both young men appeared uneasy under Whimsy's cool scrutiny. "Mr. Timothy," Whimsy began, "you spoke of delivering tools at midday yesterday. Were you alone in the garden? Did you notice anything amiss?" Timothy swallowed hard. "No, sir, it was quiet. Just the usual birds and the scent of the roses. I saw Mr. Cotterill watering the plants. He seemed distracted, but nothing unusual." "And the roses themselves?" Whimsy pressed. "Any thorns broken? Any discoloration? That might be called bleeding." The boy nodded slowly. "There's a patch near the old sundial where the roses are redder than the rest. The stems sometimes leak sap that looks like drops of blood," the gardener said. Whimsy's eyes narrowed. Sap resembling blood. Intriguing metaphor. And the sundial, where is it situated? Close to the hedge, sir, near the corner of the garden that faces the woods. With this new lead, Whimsy and Gibbons stepped back outside, their path lit by the weak glow of a gas lamp. They made their way to the sundial, which stood on a stone pedestal weathered by years. Around it, the roses indeed bloomed with an unnervingly vivid red, their stems spotted with what appeared to be resinous droplets. Nature's own little scarlet stain, Whimsy observed. But why would Mr. Cotterill choose this spot for a secret meeting? And who might he expect to meet under the cloak of midnight? Gibbons shrugged. Perhaps the solicitor or someone else involved in the inheritance matter. Or, Whimsy added quietly, someone more personal. Their investigation returned them indoors with the somber gravity of men uncovering the slow dance of concealed motives. It was in the sitting room that George Cotterill was finally confronted, his posture tense as Whimsy's incisive gaze searched for fissures in his account. You claim to have spoken with your uncle last evening, Whimsy said, voice smooth, but laced with suspicion. Yes, briefly. He seemed preoccupied, said he had urgent business to attend. Nothing more, George replied, avoiding direct eye contact. And at what hour did this conversation take place? About 7:30 before dinner. Did you notice anything unusual? Any visitors? Unfamiliar voices? George hesitated, then shook his head. No, nothing. Whimsy exchanged a glance with Gibbons, who made a note in his book. Tell me, Mr. Cotterill, have you noticed any strange behavior in your uncle these past days? Any disagreements, threats, or peculiar habits? George's expression darkened. Not threats, but he was worried about money. Debts, I think. He had argued with my father, his brother, over the estate. There's bad blood. Bad blood is often a more dangerous motive than simple debt, Whimsy mused. Thank you, Mr. Cotterill. That will be all for now. As George left the room, Whimsy turned to Gibbons. We have now the beginnings of a motive, a tension between family and finance, wrapped in a web of secret meetings and stopped clocks. There is, however, one more matter I wish to examine. He moved towards the doorway leading to the pantry, where the housekeeper had earlier noted a slightly ajar door. The subtle detail, dismissed by most as inconsequential, now beckoned with the weight of potential significance. Inside the pantry, a small brass key lay on a shelf, glinting faintly in the lamplight. Whimsy picked it up carefully, noting its peculiar shape and worn inscription. B.R. Bellringer Cottage, Gibbons speculated. Indeed, Whimsy confirmed. A key that does not fit the obvious locks is often the key to the hidden. Returning to the study, Whimsy examined the drawers and cabinets, seeking any locked compartments or secret safes that might correspond to the key. His patience was rewarded when the key slipped smoothly into a small brass lock hidden beneath the desk surface. Inside, he found an assortment of documents, old letters, wills, and deeds. One particular envelope was sealed with red wax and bore the initials E.C. Carefully, Whimsy broke the seal and unfolded its contents. A will, dated just 6 weeks prior, which dramatically altered the distribution of the Cotterill estate. Instead of George or his father, the entire estate was left to an unidentified beneficiary, a woman named Eleanor Ravenshaw. Whimsy's brow furrowed. Eleanor Ravenshaw, a name unfamiliar to the family. The housekeeper blinked, startled. I've never heard of her, my lord. Gibbons exchanged a glance with Whimsy. That changes the game considerably. Whimsy folded the will carefully. Indeed it does, Inspector. Our missing man may have been caught in a conflict not merely of money, but of identity and inheritance, an inheritance complicated by secret relationships and unacknowledged heirs. He paused, then added, the solicitor's urgent letters, the clandestine meeting at midnight, the altered will. all point to a desperate attempt to resolve or conceal matters before they spiraled out of control. Yet one question lingered, sharp and unyielding. Where was Mr. Ernest Cotterell now? As the evening shadows deepened and the fog pressed ever closer around Bellringer Cottage, Whimsy's mind raced, assembling the disparate fragments into a pattern that promised revelation, but only if patience and precision held sway. The silence was no longer mere absence. It was the hush of a secret waiting to be spoken aloud. The candlelight flickered softly against the heavy oak panels of the study, as Lord Peter Wimsey sat back in the high-backed chair, the recent discovery weighing heavily in his mind. The name, Eleanor Ravenshaw, unspoken and unknown until now, had fractured the neat facade of family loyalty and inheritance that George Cotterell had so confidently presented. Inspector Gibbons stood nearby, arms folded, his usually impassive face betraying a flicker of curiosity. A woman left the entire estate. And yet no one here seems to have heard of her. That's a problem. A considerable one, Wimsey agreed. But it may also explain why our solicitor, Mr. Prendergast, was so keen to arrange a meeting, and why Ernest Cotterell was anxious enough to disappear. The housekeeper, who had lingered quietly in the doorway, interjected with a hesitant voice. "Begging your pardon, my lords, but Miss Ravenshaw, there was talk among the village folk some time ago about a young woman who once worked here. She wasn't well liked, but I thought it was just gossip." "Ah," Wimsey said, fingers tapping lightly on the desk. "Gossip, the most perilous weapon in any social circle. And where, pray, did this young woman work?" "In the kitchen, and sometimes in the garden," she replied. "She left rather abruptly, about 3 months ago, just before Mr. Cotterell received those letters." The inspector's brow furrowed. Did anyone know why she left? Was there an argument? No one would say. She was a quiet sort, but not one to stay long if the mood turned sour. Wimsey gave a faint smile, his mind already weaving connections. "So Miss Ravenshaw may have been closer to our missing man than the family suspected, or would admit. A secret liaison, perhaps, or a concealed kinship." "Or a claimant to the estate," Gibbons added. "Precisely. And with the will naming her sole beneficiary, one wonders whether Ernest Cotterell intended to keep this secret under wraps or to make amends before his disappearance." He rose and moved toward the window, staring out into the night where the garden lay obscured by fog. "The urgency of that midnight meeting now takes on a different shade. A rendezvous with Miss Ravenshaw, perhaps? But then why the absence? Of any witness? No sign of her arrival, no trace after." Gibbons shrugged. "She could have left before anyone noticed, or perhaps never came at all. Or was prevented from coming," Wimsey mused darkly. "Our mystery deepens." The inspector glanced at his watch. "We should speak with the villagers, see if anyone recalls this Miss Ravenshaw more clearly." "Indeed," Wimsey agreed. "But before we pursue that, there is one final matter here that calls for closer examination." He beckoned Gibbons to follow him back into the study, where the scattered documents lay. Picking up the leather-bound journal discovered earlier, Wimsey flipped to a hastily scribbled entry near the end. No longer safe to trust those closest. The clock's chime conceals more than time. Midnight silence will tell all. Wimsey read the line aloud, his voice measured. An enigmatic note, perhaps written by Mr. Cotterell himself, pointing toward the clock, the chimes, and the silence. The clock stops at 2:17, but midnight is referenced here as the pivotal hour. "Sounds like a riddle," Gibbons remarked. "Indeed, and one that requires us to look beyond the obvious." Wimsey's eyes narrowed as he turned back to the window, glancing at the grandfather clock in the hallway. Its pendulum swung steadily, ticking away with mechanical precision. He crossed the room and lifted its glass door, revealing the intricate workings within. "Do you know, Inspector," Wimsey began, that such clocks can be deliberately altered to stop at a certain hour. A simple jam of the escapement or the removal of a pin can freeze the mechanism, and the resulting silence can mask noises otherwise heard clearly. Gibbons looked puzzled. You think the stopping of the clocks was intentional, to conceal something? Precisely. A calculated pause in time itself, to mute a sound or an event of significance. He tapped the clock's face gently. If the clock stopped at 2:17, what happened then? And why? Gibbons considered. No visitors reported, no cries heard. But the housekeeper mentioned a strange scent, faint but persistent, something like burnt almonds. Poison? Whimsy's eyes twinkled with that familiar mix of amusement and gravity. Ah, the sweet smell of cyanide, a favourite among poisoners, but not one to be deployed lightly. If true, it suggests a crime more deliberate, more chilling, than a simple disappearance. The inspector's face darkened. And yet no body has been found. Not necessarily a body, but evidence may remain. I propose a thorough search of the house and grounds, especially the garden area near the sundial and the spot where the roses bleed. That note to meet at midnight also warrants another look. The night deepened around Bellringer Cottage, and the two men moved with purpose through the house, rousing Timothy and the housekeeper to assist. Each corner was examined with painstaking care, drawers emptied, carpets lifted, soil in flower beds disturbed gently. The faint scent of almonds seemed elusive, but a particular patch of earth near the sundial yielded something far more tangible, a small vial, partially buried beneath a thorny rosebush. Whimsy extracted it carefully, noting the residue inside. Not quite cyanide, but a chemical compound used in horticulture. Poison in the garden, perhaps not of the human variety, but enough to cause harm. The housekeeper shuddered. That could explain why the gardener left so abruptly. Or was sent away, Whimsy added grimly. The inspector's gaze sharpened. And the note about midnight. Could the meeting have been arranged here, at the garden's edge, perhaps under cover of darkness? Most likely, Whimsy said, but someone intervened. Back inside, the study was transformed into a makeshift investigation room, documents laid out, maps unfolded. Whimsy pointed to the clock on the wall. Two things cannot be true. Either Ernest Cotterell left the house unseen after the clock stopped, or he never left at all. Gibbons frowned. If he didn't leave, then where is he? Whimsy tapped the table with a light finger. A question to which we shall soon have the answer. There is one detail still overlooked, an object missing from the study. The silver salver, the housekeeper whispered. Whimsy nodded. Yes, the salver, removed before the police arrived. An oddity, but not irrelevant. He straightened. There is a pattern emerging here. Clocks stopped, meetings missed, a missing man, a mysterious beneficiary, a poison vial in the garden, and a missing salver. He looked to Gibbons. Each piece trivial alone, but together they form the framework of a deeper intrigue, one woven with careful deception. The inspector sighed. I fear the silence at Bellringer Cottage may soon be broken with a revelation none of us expect. Whimsy's smile was wry and knowing. That, Inspector, is the essence of a proper mystery. The morning brought with it a pallid light, the kind that lent Bellringer Cottage an air of tentative normality, though the shadows beneath the eaves hinted that all was far from ordinary. Lord Peter Whimsy, Inspector Gibbons, and the housekeeper gathered once more in the study, the latter clutching her apron as if it could anchor her to a less unsettling reality. Whimsy's gaze was steady, his usual arch manner tempered by the weight of the mystery that thickened around them like the fog outside. There is one final avenue we must pursue before our speculations gather to dust. The missing salver, as you noted, is no mere trinket. It is a deliberate abstraction, a message in metal. Gibbons nodded slowly. Prendergast claimed it was removed for cleaning, but the housekeeper said she hadn't seen it packed away. Exactly, Whimsy said. If it was absent before the police's arrival, it means the removal occurred during the window between the clock's stopping and the solicitor's report, precisely the period when Ernest Cotterill vanished. The housekeeper shuddered. I remember now. The butler was unusually nervous that evening, fussing about the salver and insisting it be polished immediately. Ah, Mr. Granger, Whimsy said thoughtfully, a man whose anxiety may betray a deeper knowledge than he cares to admit. With this lead, Whimsy requested the presence of the butler. Granger entered the room, a man of austere countenance and precise movements, but today those motions were slightly tremulous. His eyes darted between Whimsy and Gibbons, seeking some unspoken mercy. Mr. Granger, might I inquire where the salver was at the hour the clock stopped? Whimsy began, his voice polite but edged with inevitability. Granger hesitated, lips tightening. In the sideboard, sir. I intended to polish it, but did not have the opportunity before the evening's events. Yet the housekeeper's recollection conflicts with this, Whimsy noted, and the salver was missing when the police arrived. Granger swallowed audibly. I cannot explain that, my lord. Perhaps you can explain why the clocks were deliberately stopped. The butler's composure cracked for a fleeting instant. I do not know what you imply. Whimsy's smile was thin and knowing. You might, Mr. Granger, if you knew more about Miss Eleanor Ravenshaw than you let on. Did she leave a message? Did she meet with your master? Or were you entrusted with secrets better kept hidden? The butler's eyes darkened. I served my master faithfully, my lord. I know nothing of Miss Ravenshaw's business. Yet the vial in the garden and the stopped clock suggest otherwise, Whimsy pressed. You were the man moving about the house at odd hours, were you not? Granger's jaw clenched, but he said no more. Whimsy turned to Gibbons. It appears our faithful servant is less innocent than he would have us believe. The inspector made a note. I shall question him further. Meanwhile, Whimsy turned his attention back to the will bearing Eleanor Ravenshaw's name. This document alters everything, he mused aloud. If genuine, it provides motive enough for silencing Ernest Cotterill by whoever stands to lose. The solicitor, Mr. Prendergast, was summoned again to clarify the circumstances surrounding the will's creation and any communications with Miss Ravenshaw. The solicitor's face was drawn, his tone measured but nervous. The will is authentic, he confirmed, signed and witnessed. Miss Ravenshaw contacted me through a third party requesting secrecy. Who was this third party? Whimsy asked. That I do not know. But the urgency was clear. She feared for Mr. Cotterill's safety. The plot tightened like a noose. Whimsy spent the afternoon retracing timelines, speaking with villagers, and piecing together a sequence of events that might explain the midnight meeting and the vanished man. Accounts varied. Some claimed to have seen a figure near the sundial garden. Others insisted the estate was eerily silent after dusk. Timothy, the gardener's assistant, provided a small but significant detail. I saw Mr. Cotterill leave the house after dinner, carrying a small parcel wrapped in brown paper. Which direction? Whimsy inquired. Towards the woods, sir. The woods, dark, dense, and the subject of many local superstitions, loomed on the estate's edge, offering a convenient hiding place or a scene for something more sinister. Whimsy paused, considering. If the clock stopped at 2:17, but Mr. Cotterill left after dinner, there is a gap of several hours unaccounted for. What transpired in that interval? The question hung unanswered as the evening shadows lengthened once more. Returning to the house, Whimsy requested to inspect the west wing, a part of the estate rarely used and long rumoured to be sealed off after a fire years prior. The door, heavy and slightly warped, resisted at first, but yielded under gentle pressure. Inside, the air was thick with dust and neglect. The room was dim, lined with blackened timbers and a faint smell of smoke that had never fully dissipated. Amidst the debris, Whimsy's sharp eyes caught the glint of something metallic, a watch, tarnished but intact. Picking it up carefully, he noted the initials EC engraved on the back. "Here lies a clue," Whimsy said quietly. "Our missing man's timepiece, lost in the ruins of memory." The watch was stopped at 2:17, the same hour the clocks in the house ceased their ticking. "The moment frozen in time," Whimsy murmured. Gibbons shook his head slowly. "It suggests Mr. Cotterell was here at that hour. But why would he come to this forgotten chamber?" "Perhaps to conceal himself or to meet someone," Whimsy said. "Or to confront a truth too burdensome for the daylight." The answer lay hidden still, buried beneath layers of silence and shadow. But one thing was certain. The ticking of the mystery was inexorable, and each second drawn closer to unveiling the silent secret of Bellringer Cottage. The damp chill of the West Wing clung to Lord Peter Whimsy as he pocketed the watch, its silent face a mute testament to the hour that might unlock the mystery of Ernest Cotterell's fate. The air, heavy with the residue of charred timber and neglect, seemed to absorb the weight of unspoken truths, and Whimsy felt a peculiar thrill, a kind reserved for the cusp of revelation, where shadows retreat before the steady light of reason. Back in the main hall, Inspector Gibbons awaited with a furrowed brow. "Your discovery suggests Mr. Cotterell's movements were more erratic than we imagined. To be in this forgotten chamber at 2:17 a.m., the precise time the clocks halted, it cannot be coincidence." "Indeed, Inspector. But why choose a room so far from the heart of the house, unless the purpose was concealment or confrontation?" "Confrontation? With whom?" Whimsy's eyes narrowed slightly. "That, my dear Gibbons, is the question upon which all else hinges." The solicitor, Mr. Prendergast, arrived soon after with additional documents, letters from Miss Eleanor Ravenshaw, penned in a delicate but determined hand. They spoke of a past intertwined with the Cotterell family, of promises made and broken, and of a desire to claim what was, in her view, rightfully hers. One letter hinted at a meeting arranged for the very night of the disappearance. Whimsy's lips curved in an almost imperceptible smile. "We now have a timeline that begins to take shape. Mr. Cotterell departs the dining room with a parcel, presumably to meet Miss Ravenshaw. He ventures to the garden, possibly to the woods beyond, but is seen later in the West Wing where his watch stops at 2:17. The clocks in the main house stop at the same hour. A series of events orchestrated with precision. The housekeeper, summoned once more, revealed a subtle but significant observation. Mr. Cotterell had recently taken to wearing a heavy cloak, sir. I thought it odd at the time, given the mild weather." "A cloak, you say?" Whimsy mused. "A useful garment for concealment or quick departure." "Could it be," Gibbons suggested, "that Mr. Cotterell intended to flee? Perhaps to avoid a threat or to protect Miss Ravenshaw?" Whimsy nodded thoughtfully. "Or to deceive those who would watch him. Which brings us back to Mr. Granger, the butler, whose nervousness and evasions raised suspicion." They agreed to question Granger again, this time with the evidence mounting. The butler arrived looking more composed, though his eyes betrayed a flicker of unease. "Mr. Granger," Whimsy began, "you are a man accustomed to order and discretion. Yet the order of this household has been disrupted, and discretion stretched thin. We know you were in possession of the salver that disappeared, and that you moved about at the hour the clock stopped. Care to explain?" Granger's hands trembled slightly. "I was clearing the study, my lord, preparing for the solicitor's visit." "An admirable diligence," Whimsy replied dryly. "But the salver was missing when the police arrived. Where is it now?" The butler's composure broke. "I hid it," he confessed. "Not to conceal, but to protect." "Protect from whom?" Granger swallowed hard. "From Miss Ravenshaw. She threatened to take everything, to ruin the family." Threats, Whimsy said softly. And what of Mr. Cotterell's disappearance? Were you involved? No. The butler's denial was fervent, but his eyes betrayed a fear deeper than mere guilt. Fear often accompanies knowledge, Whimsy observed, and knowledge is seldom given freely in mysteries such as these. With this, Granger's silence deepened, but the seed of doubt had been planted. Later, as Whimsy and Gibbons reconvened, the conversation turned to the peculiar detail of the scent of almonds, the chemical residue in the garden and its symbolic, "Wait, poison, yes," Whimsy said, "but not of the usual sort. The vial found among the roses contained an agricultural compound, enough to kill a gardener, perhaps, but insufficient for murder. Someone wished to frighten, not kill." "An attempt at intimidation?" Gibbons asked. "Precisely. A warning, to the gardener or to anyone who might pry." Their investigation into the gardener's recent departure revealed that Timothy, his assistant, had been pressured to leave abruptly. The gardener's journal contained frantic entries about a shadowy figure lurking near the sundial, a figure that matched no household member. Whimsy's gaze sharpened. A spectre, in other words, a convenient red herring cloaked in superstition. The villagers, interviewed cautiously, spoke in hushed tones of the ghost of Bellringer Cottage, a tale woven from fear and folklore, but no more substantial than the morning mist. "Superstition is the refuge of ignorance," Whimsy said, "but it also masks very human motives: jealousy, revenge, greed." Turning back to the family, Whimsy considered the tangled relationships, the unspoken grudges, and the quiet resentments that simmered beneath polite conversation. Lady Cotterell's composed exterior masked a brittle anxiety. Her son Ernest's absence cast a long shadow, and the mysterious Eleanor Ravenshaw's unseen presence loomed large. The pieces were assembling, but the picture remained incomplete. Whimsy's thoughts drifted to the clocks again, to the stop time, and the silence that fell precisely at 2:17. The synchronization was no accident. It was a calculated silence designed to conceal a pivotal act. "Soundproofing," Whimsy murmured. "The heavy curtains, the thick carpets, all designed to mute the noises within. But one must never forget the sounds beyond." He instructed Gibbons to arrange discreet surveillance around the sundial and the west wing, hoping to catch a glimpse of the missing link. As dusk settled, Whimsy walked the grounds alone, tracing the path from the garden to the woods, and then back to the west wing. The chill air whispered secrets only the patient and perceptive could hear. At the edge of the woods, the sundial stood sentinel, its stone surface cold and unyielding. Whimsy knelt, brushing away the fallen leaves to reveal faint footprints, too small for Ernest Cotterell, but perhaps belonging to Miss Ravenshaw or an accomplice. A sudden rustle behind him made him turn sharply, but only the wind answered. Returning. Indoors, Whimsy found the household gathered for evening tea, the undercurrent of tension palpable. He addressed them quietly, his tone measured. "We have uncovered truths that unsettle the foundations of this household, but the heart of the matter remains elusive. The silence at Bellringer Cottage will soon speak, and when it does, the stillness will be broken by reason and revelation." As the clock struck 8, its chimes echoing in the quiet room, Whimsy's eyes gleamed with quiet certainty. The hour approached when the veil of mystery might be drawn aside, and the true nature of the midnight silence unveiled. The night descended over Bellringer Cottage with a silence so profound it seemed to swallow even the faintest whisper of the wind. Lord Peter Whimsy, restless and alert, sat by the window of the study, the soft ticking of a solitary grandfather, clock marking the passing seconds in a steady, unyielding rhythm. The house, otherwise deserted save for the caretakers and a few unsettled servants, appeared to hold its breath, as if awaiting the inevitable revelation. Whimsy's thoughts returned to the sundial and the footprints, a small but vital trace barely perceptible beneath the fallen leaves. Their size suggested a woman, or at least someone of slender build, a detail that implicated Eleanor Ravenshaw with growing urgency. Yet the question remained, what compelled her to risk the night in such secrecy, and how did this tie into Ernest Cotterell's disappearance? The inspector entered quietly, his presence a gentle disruption. "You wish to speak with me, my lord?" "Indeed, Gibbons. The time has come for us to illuminate the shadows, but it must be done with precision. We shall enact a reenactment of the events surrounding 2:17 a.m., the hour when time stopped and presumably when our mystery deepened." Gibbons nodded, understanding the gravity beneath Whimsy's light tone. "A theatrical device, then, to flush out discrepancies and reveal hidden truths." "Precisely. The stage is set, the study, the garden, the West Wing. All must be examined, with the care of a watchmaker." Preparations were made with discreet urgency. Servants were instructed to maintain their routines but under careful observation, while the household's principal players were gathered under the guise of a casual gathering in the main hall. The atmosphere, though outwardly composed, was thick with unspoken tensions. Whimsy began the reenactment by reconstructing the timeline from the evening's events. "Let us place ourselves, moment by moment, where the clocks ceased and the—" Silence began. His voice was calm, but every syllable carried weight. "Ernest Cotterell departs the dining room after dinner, bearing a parcel of uncertain contents. He proceeds to the garden, presumably to meet Miss Ravenshaw. The clocks stop at 2:17. Yet we know Mr. Cotterell's watch, found in the West Wing, also ceased at precisely that time. How do we reconcile this?" Eyes flickered about the room and whispers settled like dust. Whimsy's gaze fixed on the butler, Granger, whose composure was now strained thin. "Mr. Granger, you were seen moving about the house in the dead hours. Can you explain your purpose?" The butler's voice was steady, but faintly defensive. "I was attending to household matters." "Sir, nothing more, indeed." "And yet you concealed the salver, a piece of silverware whose absence precedes the disruption. Why protect such an object?" "Miss Ravenshaw threatened the family, sir. The salver was to be kept safe from her. Threats that bear the weight of inheritance," Whimsy mused aloud. "And yet, we have not accounted for the missing parcel Mr. Cotterell carried." A faint murmur arose. Lady Cotterell's eyes narrowed imperceptibly. Gibbons interjected, "We learned from Timothy, the gardener's assistant, that the parcel was small, wrapped in brown paper. It could contain letters, documents, or dare I say, something less tangible, proof of a secret." Whimsy nodded. "Proof or leverage, something to shift the delicate balance of power within this family." Turning to Lady Cotterell, he asked gently, "Madam, are you acquainted with the contents of the parcel?" Her voice was composed but cool. "I know nothing beyond speculation." "Yet speculation breeds suspicion," Whimsy observed dryly. "The housekeeper spoke then, hesitant but firm. "I saw Miss Ravenshaw enter the West Wing shortly before midnight. She carried no parcel but seemed determined." "That aligns with the footprints," Whimsy said. "Miss Ravenshaw ventured into the West Wing, into the ruins of memory, as I called it." "But why?" Gibbons asked. "To confront a truth, or to retrieve something concealed?" Whimsy paced thoughtfully. "And what of the stopped clocks? The one in the hall, the grandfather clock, and Mr. Cotterell's own watch, all arrested at 2:17, a synchronization too deliberate to be chance." "The work of a saboteur," Gibbons proposed. "Or a signal," Whimsy countered. "A marker in time to align alibis or to cloak a moment of violence." He turned to the assembled household. "Let us consider the layout of Bellringer Cottage. The study connects to the hall, and from there to the garden. The West Wing is separated by heavy oak doors and corridors that echo silence more than sound. The soundproofing, The curtains, the thick carpets, all meant to mute footsteps and voices, Gibbon said. Yet the night air betrays nothing, except to those who listen closely, Whimsy said. Which brings me to the door between the main hall and the west wing. It is often locked from the inside. Granger shifted uneasily. I hold the keys. And yet you did not lock it that night, Whimsy noted. No, my lord. Why not? The butler's voice was low. I found it open when I went to secure the house. Someone entered or exited through that door after hours, Whimsy concluded. A passage hidden in plain sight. The inspector moved to the fireplace, tapping the stone with a thoughtful finger. We have testimony of a shadow seen near the sundial and in the woods. A figure slender and determined, Whimsy added, carrying no visible burden but perhaps bearing a heavy secret. Whimsy's mind returned to the vial found in the garden, the faint scent of almonds lingering in his memory. Not poison, as initially feared, but a deliberate warning. An attempt to frighten but not to kill, Whimsy repeated. A psychological weapon wielded with intent. He looked sharply at Granger. And you say you hid the salver to protect the family from Miss Ravenshaw, but might it be that you sought to protect yourself? The butler paled. I am but a servant, my lord. And servants are often privy to more than their station allows, Whimsy replied, especially when the family's fortunes and secrets hang in the balance. The atmosphere thickened, as if the walls themselves awaited a final shattering. Disclosure. Whimsy's gaze swept the room before settling on Lady Cotterell. Madam, you speak of speculation, yet your composure suggests knowledge. Are you certain you understand the full measure of your son's affairs? She returned his gaze steadily. I understand enough to mourn his absence. Mourning is easier when accompanied by truth, Whimsy said softly, and harder when shadows conceal betrayal. His eyes flicked to a small ornate cabinet in the corner. May I? Lady Cotterell nodded, albeit reluctantly. Whimsy opened the cabinet to reveal a stack of letters bound with a faded ribbon. He sifted through them carefully, extracting one dated mere days before the disappearance. It bore Miss Ravenshaw's handwriting. Here, Whimsy said, a plea for reconciliation, or perhaps a final ultimatum. Note the urgency. He read aloud a passage. Ernest, you cannot deny me what is rightfully mine. If not for your own sake, then for the sake of your family's honor, meet me and let us settle this matter before it consumes us all. A murmur spread. Such words bear the weight of desperation, Whimsy concluded, and desperation breeds deeds unforeseen. He replaced the letters and looked once more at the household. The silence at Bellringer Cottage is no mere absence of sound. It is a presence, heavy, oppressive, and charged with unspoken fears. Tomorrow we will watch and wait. The night has yet more to reveal. As the household dispersed, each lost in their own thoughts and shadows, Whimsy remained by the window, the watch in his pocket a cold reminder of the moment time ceased. The truth was near, coiled like a serpent beneath the surface, and it was only a matter of patience and sharp intellect before it struck. The first light of dawn crept through the tall, mullioned windows of Bellringer Cottage, casting long, pale beams across the polished floorboards. The house stirred reluctantly to the new day, its inhabitants moving with a weariness that betrayed restless nights and heavier thoughts. Lord Peter Whimsy stood once more in the main hall, reviewing the details amassed over the past days, each fragment a thread in the complex tapestry of Ernest Cotterell's disappearance. Inspector Gibbons arrived briskly, his expression taut but resolute. The watchers are in place, my lord. The sundial, the west wing, and the garden paths are under discreet surveillance. We hope to observe whatever shadow dared to breach these grounds in the witching hour. Excellent, Whimsy replied. The night will speak to us, whether in whispers or cries. As the household gathered for their morning routines, Whimsy found himself drawn to the study once again, the room where the mystery seemed most alive. He examined the scattered letters anew, the delicate hand of Eleanor Ravenshaw tracing desperate promises and veiled threats, a woman caught between longing and calculated resolve. His thoughts lingered on the parcel Ernest had carried, a detail as elusive as a ghost. Was it letters, documents, or some tangible key to the family's fractured past? The question gnawed at him, drawing a line between the visible and the concealed. The day wore on with a peculiar stillness, the kind that presages storm. Whimsy took the opportunity to interview the household once more, his inquiries probing beneath the surface of polite conversation. Lady Cotterell's composed exterior cracked only slightly as he questioned the dynamics between her son and Miss Ravenshaw, but she remained steadfast. "You speak of promises made," Whimsy said, softly, "and of debts owed, whether in coin, honour, or affection. Miss Ravenshaw's letters hint at something more than mere familial discord." Lady Cotterell's gaze hardened. "Eleanor has always been persistent, but Ernest was a man of discretion. Whatever passed between them, it was no secret to me." "Yet the night speaks of secrecy," Whimsy countered. "The shadows whisper of meetings not sanctioned by daylight, of movements hidden beneath cloak and darkness." The butler, Granger, was summoned again, his demeanour now a thin veneer barely concealing tension. Whimsy regarded him carefully. "Mr. Granger, you say you hid the salver to protect the family, but what of the parcel? Was there an effort to conceal or retrieve it after Mr. Cotterell's disappearance?" Granger hesitated, the weight of the question pressing upon him. "I was not aware of the parcel's whereabouts, my lord. Only that tensions had risen sharply in the days before." "And the locked door between the hall and west wing?" Whimsy pressed. "You hold the keys, but did not secure it that night." The butler's eyes flickered with unease. "It was open when I made my rounds," suggesting someone with access moved freely, someone familiar with the house's secret passages. A faint smile crossed Whimsy's lips. "Your knowledge may be more valuable than you suspect." Later, as afternoon shadows lengthened, Whimsy inspected the west wing once more, guided by the memory of footprints near the sundial. The cold stone beneath the fallen leaves told a tale of passage, of steps taken under the cover of night. Here the air still held the faintest trace of almonds, the signature scent of the warning poison, not meant to kill, but to intimidate. He turned abruptly, catching the figure of Eleanor Ravenshaw emerging from the adjacent corridor. Her eyes met his, guarded but unyielding. "Miss Ravenshaw," Whimsy began gently, "you ventured here on the night Mr. Cotterell vanished. What compelled you to enter this forsaken wing?" Her voice was steady, though her fingers trembled slightly. "I sought the parcel. Ernest promised to deliver it to me here. It contained papers, proof of a claim to part of the estate. He wanted to make amends. And yet he never appeared." "No," she whispered. "Instead, I found signs of a struggle. The watch stopped at 2:17. That hour haunts me." Whimsy's eyes narrowed. "Did you see anyone else? Did you hear anything?" She shook her head, her gaze distant. "Only the silence." "Silence," Whimsy mused, "often conceals more than sound. It is a presence, an accomplice to deception." Their conversation was interrupted by the sudden arrival of Inspector Gibbons, breathless and urgent. "My lord," he said, "we have a development. The watchers report movement near the garden's northern edge, just beyond the woods. A figure was observed carrying a bundle wrapped in brown paper." Whimsy's pulse quickened. Could it be the parcel? Most likely. They hurried outside, the late afternoon sun gilding the treetops as they moved swiftly toward the reported location. Beneath a gnarled oak, half hidden by brambles, lay the bundle, its brown paper stained with damp earth and time. Whimsy knelt and carefully unfolded the wrapping. Inside were letters, official documents, and a small, ornate locket. The papers bore signatures and seals that suggested a legal claim, something powerful enough to unsettle the Cotterell family's foundation. "This," Whimsy said softly, "is the key to the mystery. A claim that challenges the legitimacy of inheritance, a motive for silencing Ernest Cotterell. Or for someone to hide the truth," Gibbons added. As the sun dipped low, casting long shadows over the grounds, Whimsy considered the implications. The documents validated Eleanor Ravenshaw's pursuit, but also implicated others who might benefit from Ernest's absence. Returning indoors, Whimsy convened the household once more. The mood was charged, every face a mask of apprehension or defiance. Mr. Cotterell's disappearance is no longer a mere absence, but a consequence of secrets too long buried. The papers recovered confirm a claim that threatens to unravel the legacy of Bellringer Cottage. He fixed Lady Cotterell with a steady gaze. And that legacy includes not only property, but loyalty, betrayal, and perhaps murder. A silence fell, heavy and suffocating. Whimsy continued, "Tomorrow we shall investigate further. The parcel's origins, the movements of all involved on that fateful night, and the shadows that linger still." The household dispersed under the weight of his words, each step echoing the unresolved tension. Alone once more, Whimsy allowed himself a moment of quiet reflection. The pieces were aligning, the picture sharpening. Yet the final truth, the reason for the silence that fell at 2:17 and the fate of Ernest Cotterell, remained just beyond reach, outside. The evening wind stirred the branches of the old oak, as if beckoning the past to speak and the night to yield its secrets. The morning mist hung low over the grounds of Bellringer Cottage, as Lord Peter Whimsy prepared once again to delve into the tangled web of truths and half-truths surrounding Ernest Cotterell's disappearance. The crisp air was still and expectant, as if the very landscape held its breath, waiting for the next piece of the puzzle to fall into place. Whimsy was joined shortly by Inspector Gibbons, who bore the latest report from the constabulary. "My lord, the letters recovered from the parcel have been verified by the solicitor's office in London. The claim Eleanor Ravenshaw holds is indeed legitimate, a valid contestation to the Cotterell estate based on a previously unknown will, signed shortly before Ernest's father's death." "Ah, the tangled skein of inheritance," Whimsy murmured. "Nothing rouses the beasts lurking beneath the veneer of civility like the promise of wealth and title." Gibbons nodded grimly. "Lady Cotterell has been cooperative, but the household's atmosphere grows heavier, suspicions abound, and no one seems willing to trust another." Whimsy inclined his head. "Suspicion, like poison, spreads most swiftly in the dark. Our task is to shine a light, however faint, to illuminate the true shadows." Their first interview of the day was with Eleanor Ravenshaw herself. She received them in the drawing room, the faint scent of violets lingering in the air. Her face, though still pale, carried a new resolve. "My lord," she said quietly, "I have nothing to hide. Ernest was kind and true, but burdened by fears I only now begin to understand." Whimsy regarded her keenly. "Your efforts to reclaim your rightful inheritance have brought you peril. Tell me, Miss Ravenshaw, did Ernest speak of threats or warnings?" She nodded. "He mentioned letters, thinly veiled menaces, anonymous warnings to abandon his claim. He seemed frightened, but he would not say from whom." "Did you ever receive such letters yourself?" Whimsy asked, eyes narrowing. "No," she replied. "Only the silence that followed his disappearance." The detective's mind turned to the butler, Granger, and the peculiar details of his conduct. The open door, the hidden salver, the quiet movement through the west wing, all pointed to someone intimately familiar with the house's secret rhythms. They next called upon Granger, who met them in the servants' quarters. His hands, usually steady, betrayed a flicker of unease. "Mr. Granger," Wimsey began, "you have served this family for many years. Your knowledge is invaluable. Tell me about the night Mr. Cotterill vanished. Did anything unusual occur?" Granger swallowed hard. "There was a visitor, my lord, late in the evening, a gentleman unknown to most here, but whom I recognized. From the village. Who was he?" "Mr. Hargrove, a solicitor from Brighton. He came to speak privately with Lady Cotterill." Wimsey raised an eyebrow. "Quite late for a solicitor." "Yes, my lord, but Lady Cotterill seemed anxious to meet him in secret. Did you see the parcel before or after this visitor's arrival?" Granger hesitated. "I only noticed it missing after Mr. Cotterill disappeared. Was the door to the west wing locked at any time during the evening?" "No, my lord. It was ajar when I made my rounds, though I thought it unusual." Wimsey allowed the moment to stretch. "Unusual indeed. The solicitor's visit suggested a new dimension, one of legal maneuvering and perhaps coercion. Who was this Hargrove, and what role did he play in the tangled affairs of the Cotterill family?" Later, Wimsey visited the village of Little Fen, seeking out the solicitor's office. The modest establishment bore signs of recent activity, but Mr. Hargrove himself was conspicuously absent. The clerk provided a letter addressed to Lady Cotterill, bearing a wax seal matching the recovered documents. Back at Bellringer Cottage, Wimsey gathered the household. His tone was grave, yet laced with the customary ironic inflection that belied the seriousness beneath. "It seems, dear friends, that the game is afoot in more ways than one. A hidden will, clandestine meetings, and a solicitor whose discretion may be less than absolute. I dare say the tangled vines of inheritance have begun to strangle the very roots of trust." Lady Cotterill's composure faltered slightly. "What are you suggesting, Lord Peter?" "That Ernest's disappearance is not merely a matter of chance, but a calculated act to secure or suppress the will's revelation." The room fell silent, the weight of implications settling like dust. As the day waned, Wimsey retraced his steps through the west wing, noting again the curious misalignment of the grandfather clock, its minute hand inexplicably lagging by 4 minutes. A trivial detail, perhaps, yet in a household where precision was a sign of order, an anomaly worth investigating. Returning to the study, he reviewed the letters once more. Amongst the legal jargon, a cipher caught his eye. An innocuous phrase, repeated with peculiar emphasis. Could it be a code, or merely a quirk of the solicitor's penmanship? His musings were interrupted by a sharp knock. Eleanor Ravenshaw entered, holding a small, folded paper. "I found this tucked within the parcel, my lord," she said. "A note Ernest must have hidden." Wimsey unfolded the paper with delicate fingers. The message was brief, cryptic. "The truth lies beneath the silent guardian's gaze." "Beneath the silent guardian," Wimsey murmured. "A statue, a monument, a watchful figure. The sundial, perhaps? Or the old oak?" Eleanor looked puzzled. "The sundial has always been called the silent guardian by the locals. It watches over the garden, constant and unyielding." "Indeed," Wimsey said, rising. "Then we shall pay a visit before nightfall." The afternoon slipped into evening, and beneath the waning light, Wimsey and Eleanor approached the sundial. Its granite surface was worn but firm, casting a steady shadow that marked the passage of time with unerring accuracy. Wimsey circled it thoughtfully, his gloved hands tracing the edges. At the base, obscured by moss and fallen leaves, he found a loose flagstone. Gently lifting it revealed a small cavity, within which lay a leather pouch. With care, Wimsey extracted its contents. A delicate locket matching the one found in the parcel and a folded paper yellowed with age. The note was a confession, penned in trembling script, an admission of guilt, a revelation of long-hidden truths, and a plea for forgiveness. The confession implicated a figure long thought loyal, the Butler, Granger. The note spoke of jealousy, of a betrayal fueled not by greed, but by a twisted sense of justice and protection for the family name. Wimsey's expression remained unreadable. So, beneath the silent guardian's gaze, the truth has lain concealed, waiting for time to release it. Returning inside, Wimsey confronted Granger with the evidence. The butler's facade cracked, and in a voice thick with regret, he confessed. "I never wished him harm," he said. "But Ernest's claims threatened to shatter all we held dear. I confronted him that night, but the argument escalated. He stumbled and struck his head. I panicked and concealed the truth." Wimsey listened, the irony of a man so devoted undone by misguided loyalty not lost on him. A tragedy born of misplaced guardianship. The household absorbed the revelation. In stunned silence, Lady Cotterell's eyes shone with a mixture of sorrow and relief. Wimsey's final words were delivered with the arch wit that had endeared him to so many. "It seems, in this quiet corner of England, even the silent guardians can be complicit in the loudest of crimes." As the sun set beyond Bellringer Cottage, the shadows receded, not by magic, but by the steady light of reason, patience, and the indomitable intellect of Lord Peter Wimsey. The drawing-room at Bellringer Cottage was heavy with an atmosphere that only the culmination of long and intricate inquiry could bring, a charged silence, punctuated by the ticking of the grand old clock, which now, peculiarly, chimed with a punctuality previously absent. Lord Peter Wimsey stood near the fireplace, a faint smile tugging at the corners of his lips, eyes gleaming with the quiet satisfaction of a man who has finally corralled a serpent from its lair. "Ladies and gentlemen," Wimsey began, his voice suave and unhurried, "we have come to the moment when the shroud of uncertainty must be lifted. You may have noticed the seemingly insignificant anomalies, misaligned clocks, the ajar door to the west wing, the curious absence of certain servants at key moments. Such trifles might have been dismissed, but in the hands of a determined inquirer, they form a pattern as intricate and revealing as a finely embroidered tapestry." He paused, casting a glance over the assembled faces. Lady Cotterell's resolute composure, Eleanor Ravenshaw's tense expectancy, Inspector Gibbons's vigilant scrutiny, and Granger's pallid, conflicted mien. The disappearance of Mr. A. Ernest Cotterell was no caprice of fate, but a carefully orchestrated act, cloaked beneath layers of family loyalty, legal subterfuge, and human frailty. The discovery of the hidden will by Lady Ravenshaw and the subsequent threats received by Ernest set the stage for a drama that tested the bounds of trust within these walls. Wimsey's eyes locked onto Granger's. "Mr. Granger, it was your knowledge of the household's secret rhythms, the soundproof doors, the concealed passages, that initially perplexed the investigation. You moved unseen, yet not unnoticed, in your efforts to protect a family name you valued above all else. It was you who confronted Ernest on that fateful evening." The butler's gaze dropped, the weight of his guilt laid bare. "I never intended to kill my lord, only to warn him, to dissuade him from upending the fragile peace we had." "And yet," Wimsey continued, "an unfortunate accident occurred, a struggle, a misplaced step, and the fatal blow that silenced a man determined to reclaim what was his. Your ensuing attempts to conceal the truth only deepened the mystery." Turning to the assembled company, Wimsey gestured to the sundial in the garden. The cryptic note found beneath the silent guardian's gaze was no idle riddle but a confession, one that awaited discovery in the most fitting of places. Time, that relentless arbiter, revealed what human cunning sought to hide. Lady Cotterell exhaled slowly, her lips pressed in a thin line of acceptance. "The family has suffered enough," she said softly. "It is a cruel mercy that truth, however late, comes to light." Wimsey's smile was wry but not unkind. "Indeed, And as Shakespeare reminds us, the truth will out. Though sometimes it requires a patient seeker to coax it from its hiding place. Inspector Gibbons stepped forward, placing a reassuring hand on Granger's shoulder. Justice will take its course, but the compassion of understanding need not be absent. As the group dispersed, Wimsey lingered near the hearth, lighting a slender cigar with deliberate care. He regarded the room with a detached amusement. Bellringer Cottage, he mused aloud. A sanctuary for secrets, a stage for human folly, and a reminder that even the most silent of guardians can bear witness to the loudest of tragedies. With a final glance toward the gathering dusk outside the mullioned windows, Lord Peter Wimsey took his leave. His steps echoed softly down the hall, leaving behind a household forever altered, but no longer haunted by unanswered questions. Outside, the evening star emerged, a solitary beacon in the darkening sky. As Wimsey disappeared into the night, one might have fancied the faintest hint of a smile playing about his lips, an acknowledgement that in the great game of intellect and intuition, justice had been served at last.